How's it going, everybody? Welcome to week 3 here. Nations, nationalism, imperialism, and imperial eyes. So we're back into world history stuff. So we're kind of like the movements was sort of laying the groundwork for modernity, and now we're kind of seeing how that's playing out on a global scale, and this is kind of getting us to, again, the 21st century, to where do nations come from? Why are they there? And the first discussion of that is just what is a nation, which, if you've never thought about, it's an interesting thought experiment. We live in a nation. Where did it come from? How does it work? How does it function? Why are there nations? And that's really what, hopefully you have a little better idea of that, the nations are constructs. They're difficult. They're changing. They're never the same. They're bound on traditions and shared pasts and experiences in the present, and sometimes nations fail and new nations emerge. So and that's kind of, that's sort of the story there that I tried to kind of tell in those lectures, particularly kind of USA, Haiti as these first nations, and then those ideas spread through South America as the Spanish Empire sort of declines, and then but the challenges there. That one about the United States lecture, I think people are a little more familiar with the United States, at least, and it's a good lesson that it was the first nation, but it was also the first failed nation, right? It broke apart the Civil War. It was brought back together, and it's still going today. So, but you can kind of extrapolate that to every nation. Every nation has its internal struggles, external issues that balance, which is kind of what I want you to sort of be thinking about in your Padlet. That's why those questions there. I tried to kind of talk about the different things that nations, the different facets of a nation, internal organization, what kind of state, what kind of citizens do you want? That's the big thing about nations that are different than past constructs. That the idea of a citizen, that people have rights in this state, that there's not a king or some person there that can say, no, you're the subject under me. Ideally in a nation, all citizens are equal, right? That's the ideal construct. Is it in practice all the time? Not probably not, but that's what constitutions tell us. So that Padlet, be thinking through that. What is that? I know it. Have some fun with it. I do want you to be, come up with any kind of nation you want, give it a name, but do try to be historically, grounded in history. What things you learned about with the lecture on nations. So that's that. Nation spread. Japan, we talked about. Philippines, back to Europe. And then out of that, right, particularly with the sort of breaking away of the Americas, this new round of this shift from colonialism, and I kind of explained the difference between colonial and imperialism. The big one here is sort of direct rule, direct control, and that was kind of this next phase of history that places like Africa, Oceania, China, all these areas are kind of imperialized, this sort of more direct rule, military intervention, and economic extraction, right? There. And so we talked about imperialism, and it's economic, it's political, it's military, but it's also cultural. There's definitely a cultural element. And again, I tried to kind of connect that with this idea, some of these ideas that were going on in the Enlightenment, that there's this idea of Darwinism, that the ideas of science that are applied to different groups. Concepts of racism really come up, that there's predestined peoples that in this case, at this time in history, was particularly sort of, white Europeans saw themselves as they imperialized. They were bringing this idea of civilization, right? Civilizing the world, which that's one thing in history. History changes, and our interpretations of that has obviously changed as well. So that's kind of it. But we're global. We've gotten to the 20th century. We're on the cusp of that. Next week we'll talk about the 20th century stuff, the conflicts and the changes that have occurred in the 20th century. Yeah, I think that's it. To discussion post 1 today. Just kind of keep going with that. I'll read them over. Again, answer the questions. Use the readings in your answer. So it's kind of how to integrate primary sources is a practice of that. Padlet is due Thursday, so take care of that. I'll upload. I looked over your Padlet architecture write-up. Good. A lot of people picked a lot of really interesting places, and you did a good job of connecting it to the age of expansion. That was the big thing, right? That, how does this relate to things we've talked about in the course? And that was one of the comments I made in a lot of people's there. I commented on Lamaku. Do make references to the course, right? If you picked something from China, right? Talk about the Ming, and talk about the Europeans in China, right? That's part of this age of expansion. Or I think some people did the Taj Mahal, right? Oh, well, what is that about the Mughal Empire, right? We talked about the Mughal Empire. How are the Mughals in this period of the age of expansion as well? So the idea here, I mean, it's a practice. I still gave people points, but it's a practice of trying to expand out. Take what you learned in this class and apply it. Is sort of what we want there. And then lastly, on Friday is quiz 2. Just so you know, I updated the review guide a little bit. There were some terms I realized that I kind of rearranged the lectures a little bit, and I changed some terms, so they're not there. It's very minor, just sort of the last little part. Take a look at the review guide, a new one. Quiz should be pretty straightforward now. 5 W's, kind of see what I'm doing there. This time I want you to put at least 2 terms from the review guide in your 5W response. So, yeah, I think that's it. Have a good rest of your week.